Greetings. Welcome back to Cape Lead Revolution. This is Chachi once again with yet again another edition of Leaders with Leaders. Having some good drinks with good friends, and this time my command chief, the command chief of the 93rd Air Ground Operations Wing, Chief Master Sergeant Terrence Mojo Edwards. Chief, thank you for being here. This is absolutely huge. So cheers.
I appreciate it.
Cheers to you. Appreciate your time this evening.
Indeed.
Let's have some fun. So, before we get into the egg out, some of your leadership specific stuff, for our viewers and our listeners out there, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So as the kind introduction alluded to, I'm Terrence Mojo Edwards, preferably going by Mojo, if you will. I know some of y'all would just refer to me as Chief. I answer to that also. But I'm originally from Tampa, Florida. I'm happily married to another military member, Dwindlin Edwards, who's a 1 Charlie. I can't say 0 anymore. I was told to say that she's a 1 Charlie hero, but she's aviation resource management. So I'm currently at Moody waiting for my family to join me. Family's still out at Eglin. You know, when our son graduates high school, the family will join me this summer. But been doing this business for 27 years. Been doing it happily. Enjoyed every step of the way. And excited and nervous about this new command chief star that I'm stepping into, and just ready to get after it though. So with that, Chachi, let's do it, brother.
You bet. So let's kind of start. I know you and I got to have some conversation, get to know each other a little bit more today. But you know, from Airman Edwards to Chief Master Sergeant Edwards to now Command Chief Edwards, did you ever dream or even picture yourself in the position you're in now?
Never. That's an easy question to answer. You know, I was speaking to an ALS class, and they kind of posed a similar question to me. And I hit the streets as an Airman Basic. And I'm proud that I hit the streets as an Airman Basic to say, hey, came quite a ways to...
From 1 to 9.
Yes, from an Airman Basic to where I'm at now. But no, never had my eyes set on Chief. Never really had my eyes set on Staff Sergeant. When we came in, still Buck Sergeant. You know, so starting with the NCO realm at that level, no idea. I came in and was a partier and lived check to check, and I was great at both of those things as an airman. But along the way, you know, you always encounter someone where you have that epiphany, and you take another route.
You bet. Yeah. You know, and kind of to that end, I heard a lot, and perhaps some of you've done this regardless of career. You know, like in the Air Force, say, you know, I enlisted in blah blah year, but then I joined the Air Force later. You kind of had that epiphany. When was that epiphany for you?
That was in '97.
Okay.
97. I had a chief that was the base basketball team coach, and I played base basketball, and he had the greatest temperament that I had ever encountered from someone in the military up to that standpoint. And this instance, Airman Edwards' name came across the blotter yet again, and he called me to his office. And when he called me to his office, significant emotional event, and for him to have a significant emotional event with me, told me that I needed to get my stuff together. Nice. Because I had never seen him be demonstrative at all. And he had had enough with me. He's seen a lot of potential that I didn't necessarily see in myself, if you will, and it kind of pushed him to another person, a person that I had never encountered before, even in basketball practice when we may not have been doing the things we were supposed to do there. Right. But this took him to a whole nother level, and that essentially got me to a whole nother level.
You know, and for the people who've listened, I got kicked out of a country when I was a staff sergeant. Got kicked out of my Spec Ops unit, so I'd been in about 7 years at that point, and I really had to come to grips you know, with who I was. I think just as an individual, and then also as an NCO and an airman with Big A. So what advice would you have out there to some of our perhaps our young airmen, or even some of our young officers who are struggling to find themselves in their airmanship in our United States Air Force?
Wow, that's great. I think what I really had to come to grips with, what may help some of our airmen out there, is I had to understand first and foremost what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be, what I wanted the Edwards brand to represent, right? Before I knew of a such thing of branding. But I had to kind of have that conversation with myself and say, first and foremost, before you can be a great teammate, you got to be a great you. And so I really kind of dug in deep to figure out what that meant to be a great me, personify that, share that with the team, and then the team embrace that And I told the ALS class that I feel as though I came into the military with the druthers of people who had been in the military before me. So I think I had let their sensibilities kind of warp my sentiment when I came in, and I would get frustrated over things that was their baggage. It wasn't really my baggage.
Right.
So I had to shed other people's demons, understand what my demons were, fight them accordingly. And after I did that and truly identified with who I was as a person, I became a significantly better teammate. So all that to say, back to your question, you know, for the young airmen, for the young CGOs that are out there, have a firm understanding of who you are and embrace that. And once you embrace it, you can explain that to people so they can better adjust themselves to who you are as a person, not this facade of who you think they want you to be. And I think once I did that and really embraced that and started to share that with my teammates, it became more cohesive in how we went forward.
You know, so, you know, as far as that and kind of understanding you and who you are and who you want to be as an airman, or maybe where you want to go with your career or leadership styles, just from us chatting at dinner tonight, you're looking to blaze this path of truth and purity and awesomeness from what it seems like, and just do the right things for the right reasons, for the right net gain, and something that seems to be tangible and visceral for our airmen to get behind and follow. So how did that start for you, and where do you want to see the Air Force go, and what do you want to do to help lead us there?
Well, you know, I think that question dovetails into General Goldfein's and Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Wright's kind of push on diversity. And so from a diversity standpoint, I think we need to do a better job of understanding who people are and where they come from. And I know General Welsh used to say everyone has a story, right? And understanding what that story is, attempting to, if you will, use the adage of walk a day in their shoes. So for me, a lot of that came from that. So kind of getting to that question, another thing that I shared with the Airman Leadership School was the aspect of, kind of similar to your question, they asked me what was a roadblock. And I said, well, ideally I thought a roadblock was in many of the organizations that I was in, I was the only African American that was in those organizations. So even though I may have told my story, no one was willing to accept that that story was a version of the truth.
Sure.
Right? Because it was just a blind spot to them. You know, so for me, circling back to your question, I think we as Air Force have to be willing to understand that a person's version of the story can actually be factual, even if it's a blind spot that you can't see.
You bet.
Yeah, so I think when we do a better job of that, we understand the diversity, we understand our blind spots, if you will, and those instances that individuals are trying to share of what they're going through, that they could be factual. And once you kind of get that to the forefront, have enough courage and nerve to discuss it, right, to try to overcome it or put some things in place that'll mitigate it, I think we can go quite far. I mean, we always do. We always rise to the challenge.
You know, and I think I give huge credit to the United States Air Force, and again, I think a lot of it started with General Welsh, at the time Chief Cody, and absolutely goes to General Goldfein now Chief Wright. As far as how we go and communicate, one of the things that I kind of learned was the difference between reality and truth. And I think this is kind of what you're talking about is someone could walk by and hear me say that Chief Edwards is the worst command chief in the world, but what they didn't hear 5 seconds prior to that is, you know, the one thing you'll never hear me say is that Chief Edwards is the worst command chief in the world. Because what they heard, that is their truth.
That's right.
But it's not the fact.
That's right.
And I don't think we apply that methodology or just our own understanding that while I may have experienced this or heard this from one level or different, because you know, we just need to understand that people have different stories, and that the versions of truth and fact vary, but rarely are we open-minded enough, I think, to at least try and hear both of them.
That's right.
You know, it's one of those. I was talking to today AFPC Command Chief Kenny Lindsay. He was on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about some of that as far as diversity and or discrimination that he's had to go through, even as one of the prominent command chiefs inside the United States Air Force, as an African American male, and some of the prejudices that he still has to deal with, not necessarily inside the Air Force. And good on him. He said, you know, he goes, I haven't witnessed prejudice in my career, as far as he said. He goes, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. You know, and just having people being open-minded enough to realize that, like it's weird because I remember seeing things happening right in front of my face that I didn't realize it was happening until later.
So it's interesting, kind of on that topic. So I had a conversation with my son who's 17 and spent a large portion of the time in Germany, 5 years, kind of in those pivotal formative years, if you will, in what I like to call a blanket of protection, growing up on an Air Force base, if you will,
Sure.
growing up abroad. And at that time is when many of the things were transpiring back in the States with unarmed black men getting killed and things like that. So one of the things that I was talking to him about, which is kind of gives perspective to the story, I was mentioning to him, if he gets stopped on base, the first thing that he's likely to do is to reach for his wallet to grab his ID, right? Because a defender is always going to ask to see your ID first. And I'm like, well, when you transition that to the States, and now civilian cop, if you reach for your ID, that can have a different outcome.
You bet.
You know, and that's just one of those things to where, yeah, that's something we kind of talk about in an African American home that another home may not talk about because they're not going through the same circumstances. So,
you know, and kind of it was weird along those lines, just as far as the diversity piece. When I was on PACAF staff, it was really odd. At the other end of we had this big room sectioned off into 3 different things, and at the very end were 2 female Chief Master Sergeants. Chief Master Sergeant retired Jacinda Rivers and Chief Master Sergeant Yvette Ware. And it was weird because they'd have some of their people come up and talk to them. And I remember them walking outside, and they would still revel. These females would revel in the fact that they just met 2 female chiefs.
yeah.
And like, I thought it was so cool that they got such a kick out of it, and I thought it was so criminal that they were so blown away by it, where it should be an everyday, thing. And I think the Air Force is doing really, really well. What do you think that maybe we could do as an Air Force to even still kind of drive home the message of diversity and inclusion?
I think we have the messaging correct. It's now those individuals that are in leadership positions taking a chance and manifesting the message. Because sometimes the messaging makes it out there, but there's people in the loop, right? So anytime there's people in the loop, it can go awry. So you can have a great message, but if people are not willing to action that message. So I would just say we have to continue to action that message and take it as a challenge. And when the opportunity permits, right, don't do it just for sake of doing it, right? Do it because it's merited. Do it because it's merited, but taking that chance and allowing diversity to have a chance to be successful.
A phenomenal point. And regardless whether you're in the military or not, just understand it was weird. My EO, Jessica Tabor, she had the best analogy ever. Diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance.
That's right.
And so I think we're doing a great job of inviting the party. I think that messaging is great, but I think really as a society, I think we can do a better job of asking people to dance.
That's correct.
And I think we just focus on the dancing aspect. I love that metaphor. So Sergeant Tabor, still love you. That's amazing. So switching gears a little bit as far as taking chances is you started out in one career field as ammo.
That's correct.
And then you cross-trained into intel. And then you kind of got into the spec ops side of things.
That's right.
And like some of the deep spec ops side of things that were. So that was a huge chance. How much has that affected you and shaped your career and your understanding of A, military operations, and then B, leadership?
So starting off with military operations, I think just about anyone in any job, whether it be special ops or McDonald's, if you will, you want to see the fruits of your labor. You want to see the customer smile when so for me, I love McDonald's French fries. So in Guam, every Friday after my haircut, I went and got me a medium order of French fries. And that was my win for myself. But the person that cooked the fries may not have known how much of a smile that they're giving me just for that simple gesture of them doing that perfectly. So I think just in general, many people want to be able to see the end result of the work that it is that they're accomplishing. So I think going into the special ops realm, I had been doing intel for a while, and I had been doing it with air-based operators, if you will, pilots and air crew, and you give them a mission brief, and then they fly miles away to conduct that mission. and you don't necessarily see it firsthand. Once I got into the spec ops side of the house, and I'm now with ground-based operators, I'm accompanying them on these missions that they're going on, and not quite as much in harm's way as they were, a one-off, if you will.
Sure.
But I'm seeing the intelligence present itself real time or near real time.
You bet.
I mean, so the level of confidence that gives you, because something that you provided to an operator worked, and not only worked, they all came home, right? Because at the end, that's what you want, for all the operators to come home. So going into special ops and seeing that was great. Now, from a leadership perspective, you know, I don't want to pit combat air force against spec ops, if you will, but you know, kind of growing up in the CAF, everything was very regimented. Everything was very strict in detail, and the way that I grew up, if you will, especially being an ammo guy at first, and everything had to be done by the TO, right?
Sure.
You didn't go outside of the TO, and now to kind of come into intel to where, you know, you kind of taught that, hey, if you mess up, someone doesn't come back home. You know, so you're very specific about everything that you do. But when I transitioned into special ops, I had a little bit of flexibility to critically think on my own. And if this challenge that I have now presents an obstacle that you couldn't scenario for, you couldn't game plan for, the expectation is for me to still critically think, maybe use some logic and some common sense in there. And even though the written documentation may not tell you to do this,
right,
you're enabled to make a decision on the spot to get after it. You know, so seeing that and getting immersed in that was just a whole nother level of excitement. And I think the other thing that was very, very prominent about when I came to special ops is, when I came to special ops, it's about you as a person, not so much about your rank. Meaning, if you got a skill set and that skill set is valuable and is cherished, it doesn't matter if you're a senior airman with that skill set or if you're a seasoned tech sergeant. They want the best person for the job at that time, regardless of the rank, predicated on experience, training, all those factors that go into it. So I think in that environment, it wasn't about my rank. It was about, this was the best person to do this job. This was the best person to do that mission. And that was a breath of fresh air also, not everything being ranked based. And it was really about the team, and it was really about the skill set that you had to make the operation happen.
So I think that's absolutely huge, and it's one of those, you know, if you have an opinion, if you're going to be out there putting your life on the line, you know, share your opinion. Maybe you've been out on a few more deployments, maybe you have some opinion, maybe you as the frontline guy have something to provide that maybe conflict with some of our doctrine, or perhaps conflict with some of our instructions or manuals and stuff like that, which, as a corollary, I think is completely in line with what General Goldfein and Chief Wright are saying, and they're saying, hey, don't wait for me.
That's right.
Get ahead of the power curve. Just kind of communicate. So what would you want to say to any young airman out there, young lieutenant who's kind of struggling and, you know, who has input, don't know how to share it or don't know what to do, when they just want to find a good dude answer and go forward?
I would say, one, you know, have the confidence in order to do it, and ensure that you are attempting to live to our additional tenets of, right, unethical, illegal, immoral, right? Still try to throw those things in there that are not necessarily codified in a lot of documents, but
sure,
things that we try to live by as well. And if you can encapsulate all of that, go forward with the endeavor, and then attempt to circle back and do a lessons learned, do an after action report, right? Try to place it in something to where now we can up channel it and get it codified, or say, hey, the system is out of date. There's a better way out there, but have the confidence and the willingness to know that, one, your perception matters, your experience matters, and two, that you have an avenue to submit it through to where it can reach our leaders of the Air Force, and you can go to Air Force Association symposiums that are going to happen, and do a tank with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, right? And then have your endeavor agreed upon right there in real time to see it come to fruition. So yeah, I think if you can tap into all those things, trust the system, right?
Yes.
The system is not always fast. It's not always fast as we want it to be, but we at least want them to trust the system. And I think now with some of the initiatives that we have going out there, innovation is a big thing. I think all commanders and all superintendents and chiefs at every level are talking about innovation. So kind of just getting those innovation ideas up and allowing the system to recognize them.
You know, and I think that's probably a good lesson for anybody. Definitely, if you're an airman in the Air Force, you know, you're only 3 levels removed from Chief Wright. You know, as far as that goes, like people can call him. You know, or if I'm your squadron chief, I can call you. You can call him. Like it's the Air Force is much smaller for us.
That's right.
You know, definitely for United States, definitely in the command chief realm. And I don't think people realize that whether you're in the Air Force or not, senior leaders are still people.
That's right.
That you can have this conversation with. That you know you're a husband, you're a military spouse as well.
That's right.
You're a father. You're a good dude. You're a Buccaneers fan.
Yes. Don't hold that against me.
You know, or Browns fan, right? You know. So you know, it's 2019 could be good.
It's gonna be good.
I'm so hopeful.
Y'all putting the pieces in place. That's for certain.
Oh, I hope it plays out. Baker Mayfield, I want to get you on this podcast, and anyone on the Browns really like if you Joe Schobert, your leadership on there last year completely went under the radar, but I love you. You did a great job, and not trying to take anything away from Myles Garrett because you're an absolute beast too, Myles. But I want to see all these Browns on my podcast one day, so we'll kind of see what happens. But you know, go back to the point is I think this is what General Goldman and Chief Wright are saying. Just communicate, and I think there's enough evidence to show that they are listening.
That's
and
right.
like Chief Wright's saying is they're squinting with their ears, and try and hear just the different changes with whether senior NCOs have to test for promotion. You know, whether we're going to get away from A1C and below EPRs, like all these great things. So, like, what are some of the best things that you've seen happen throughout your time in the Air Force?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, actually, the sexual assault program. The willingness to have that tough conversation now, the approach that we're attempting to take. I think the aspect of, I think throughout my 27 years of doing this, and maybe it's just because of some of the positions that I'm in now, but I feel as though we reach outside the military a little bit, and if it's working in the masses, if you will, in the civilian sector, we take a gander at how it's working in that sector, see if we can tweak it to fit our model for us to work for our airmen who come from that larger population of life, if you will. So I think our willingness to take commercial off the shelf and try to apply it to what we do as airmen is one thing that's been a great transition. And again, I think the sexual assault program is one of those factors that's been pivotal in our time, you know, especially coming up, not hearing about any of those things at all. And if you did hear about it, it was an afterthought. Right. To where now people trust the system. They trust the system. They're willing to give the system a chance. Absolutely. To work. And I think many of our programs going forward, especially with our leaders, putting out that message and that talk to us, communicate with us, give us an opportunity. Sure. So I think that's something that's really been prevalent over the years also, is getting that information out and seeing the leadership attempt to get to yes on what our concerns are.
You bet. Yeah. You know, and then as far as leadership goes, it's weird, and you know, I learned a lot from my time as a command chief, and what I learned, what really stuck out to me was the different types of airmen that joined. One of the airmen that he was a master sergeant that I worked with in Kuwait, was one of the Lost Boys. Really? And so he came over and became a master sergeant, and it was great. And he was deployed, and his wife was going to have their first kid. You know, so all these different things. What are some of the unique stories of some of the unique people that you've had the honor of leading that have affected you, or that have, because like so many people join not just because of the opportunity that the Air Force or military may provide, just gives them an escape from their own reality. Even you know, whether it's a family thing, whether it's a location thing, a socioeconomic thing, whatever. What have been some of the things that you've seen in your career that have really stood out?
And I don't know if this is because of my own accounting. I tend to gravitate towards those stories of the individual that felt as though they were the outsider, you know, growing up, and however that may have been. They weren't the jock They weren't the cool kid in school. They weren't the smartest, if you will, but they had a tremendous work ethic. And I think many of the stories that have really resonated with me have been stories of people overcoming. And I'm always um, very pleased to hear the grit that people had to want something more for themselves when they felt as though they weren't dealt a fair hand. And I've heard many of those stories, whether it's, you know, coming from an abusive family, coming from a low income family, coming from, you know, being the first generation removed from being immigrants to now join the military. I find those fascinating. I find those fascinating of those military members who are still a citizen of another country, attempting to gain their citizenship in our mighty country. So I think those have been some pretty cool stories to, because I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right.
Until I heard that. I was like, wait a minute, should I be checking on you right now? That's really a thing. And needless to say, I did, you know, to kind of do my homework because I didn't understand that was a thing. But I thought that was very cool to understand that people just want what's best for them and their family. And they want their family situation, their kid's situation to be better than their situation. So if you're already a citizen of another country, but you have the wherewithal to say, I want the U.S. to be my country of citizenship, and I'm willing to go through the military ranks in order for me to attain that, I think that's a pretty cool story.
That is absolutely pretty cool. You know, as far as that, what are some of the places that you've been around the world, or perhaps not even places, but just circumstances or events that have just shocked you? Like good shock, bad shock, that have affected you as a leader for either how you plan to lead people differently or better, and or just how you want to interact with human beings.
So, shocking place. So I was raised in Tampa. I grew up in the projects. I grew up with my great grandma. So when I was in the halls of CIA headquarters, that was kind of like, you have got to be kidding me type of moment. And just from knowing where I started, where I came from, even though I came in ammo, I always wanted to be an intel guy. And I'm just going to tell the sappy story real quick of why I wanted to be an intel guy. James Bond. I was a huge James Bond.
Nice.
So that's really it.
I joined to jump out of planes.
Yeah.
It's no different. You know.
Nothing more sensational than that. I loved James Bond. All of them. It doesn't matter who it was. Roger Moore, Sean Connery. Doesn't matter.
Nice.
If it's a Bond guy, that's my dude. You know. So for me to kind of be in CIA, that's when I really kind of just stood still.
Right.
And was like, wow, you've really done pretty well for yourself, understanding what your beginnings were. I think the things that really shaped my leadership, I don't like to say I have a leadership style.
Okay.
I think for me, my style is that I don't have a leadership style. And it's kind of because of some of the things that we mentioned earlier on how diverse our force is. So for me, if you have one style, then you're probably tremendously behind the curve because we don't have one style of people. You know, so for me, I try to be that chameleon in that manner to whatever style I think I have. If that airman is contrary to that style, then guess what? I'm gonna level up. I'm gonna step my game up, and now I'm gonna become the style that I need to become to be successful with that airman. You know, so for me, I don't like to box myself in, if you will, kind of. You know, one of our special ops things that I'm sure you're familiar with, right? I'm gonna build a box and I'm gonna step outside of it so I can think outside of it.
Right.
You know, so for me, that's kind of what leadership style is. I try not to relegate myself to just one in particular, but I think the moments that have shaped me the most are the moments that I've been more scared of. So when I came into special ops, right, you always kind of hear the stories, you hear the lore, and you hear the legends of some of the things that have happened in special ops, some of the missions. You know, we read some of the history of what our airmen are out there doing in those type of organizations. So I felt as though I was well trained. I felt as though I had the experience to do it, but you never know how you're going to react to a punch until you're punched.
Right.
Right. So for me, those leadership situations became outside the wire. I think me being outside the wire, I think deployment situations are the situations that shape me the most because it helped me to overcome my fear. It helped me to understand that I can lead teams. It helped me to understand that I could critically think when I'm presented with a situation that I didn't necessarily plan for. All I had to do was trust in my people, trust in my training, and that we could overcome that. So I think my leadership was shaped by fear and the challenges and the opportunities. And so in messaging to those folks that I'm blessed to lead, I try to help them to understand that they're way more capable of attaining their desires than they probably give themselves credit for. And many of them think that they can't do it because they haven't met that challenge yet or
Right.
placed in that situation to exhibit that skill set that they don't know resides within them. So I just try to help them to understand that it's in there.
Right.
It's in there, and that situation is going to present itself. But it doesn't have to present itself in a deployment. It can present itself in standing up for your airmen at the right time, right? Because most people think that, oh, I got to do something outside the wire, or I got to be in a deployed location to be courageous. No, you don't. Standing up for your airmen in the opportune
that takes some
time.
guts too, right?
Take some guts, right?
Fighting the good fight.
Exactly. Whether that be challenging your command chief, right, with just a simple conversation. Hey, Chief Edwards, Chief Mojo, I think we're doing it right there. All right, talk to me about it. Right, that's a courageous act. So I think sometimes we have to help our folks and our airmen to understand that courage is not always outside the wire.
You bet.
And you can be courageous day to day. You just have to want to be courageous day to day.
Roger that. Yeah, it's funny. Colonel Birch and I were talking. It's one of those. The same water that softens the noodle hardens the egg.
Yeah.
It's not about the environment. It's kind of what you're made of.
That's right.
And how you react to all those things. So, well, that will take it to our first break. And we'll catch you here after break with the Command Chief, 93rd Air Ground Operations Wing, Chief Mojo. We'll be right back. Welcome back from break. We're getting here ready to start the second half of the Leaders with Leaders with Chief Edwards. So, we talked a little bit at dinner, talked a little bit at break, and so I think you and I suffered some of the same fate when we were young airmen.
Yes.
On whether some of our leaders and or bosses or supervisors did or didn't care for us. How would you characterize your time as an airman and the mentorship and care that you got?
Well, I definitely would say that there was a lack thereof when I was an airman. And this is not to cast aspersions on the munitions career field. This was harkening back to a different time, if you will. I mean, I came in the early 90s. I came in 91. And as I mentioned earlier, I hit the streets as an airman basic, if you will. So I got to my first base, Eglin Air Force Base, 33rd Fighter Wing, as an airman basic and in the munitions career field. And just right away, it didn't go well. And for me, a lot of it was predicated on the way I was raised by my great grandmom. The one thing that I was raised to not allow was someone to disrespect me just for the sake of. And in my early years as a munitions guy, there was a lot of disparaging terms. There was a lot of like I said, I don't want to make this career field seem worse than what it is. It was just my situation.
Sure.
Talked down to a lot, not trained in the way that others were trained. Was kind of left to figure out a lot of stuff, hard knocks life on my own. But for me, it really boiled down to the way that they communicated with me, right? If you gotta get in my face, right, spit all in my face, trying to teach me a message, I don't know what you're trying to teach me at that juncture. So it just didn't go well, and I got in trouble a lot because of that. People say that I'm outspoken. I feel as though I speak when I have to. I don't go searching for stuff.
Right.
But yeah, if you're in my face cursing me out,
There's a lot of jacked up stuff right here. You'll have a lot of stuff to say.
Yeah, belittling me and things that I didn't think came with your position, then yes, then I didn't always handle them probably the way that they were thinking it was going to go. So yeah, so in those early years, I really felt like an outsider. Um, but the thing that I was also raised was with a great work ethic. So whatever challenge was kind of thrown at me, I wanted to exceed it to kind of say, hey, that's all you got. That's all you're gonna come with. Yeah, I could do that easy. So an example of that is, um, I won BTZ. I won BTZ, and you attempt to say that you didn't do anything single handedly, but I would just say that no one was attempting to help me to understand what the BTZ process was.
Right.
So I was having to do a lot of this research myself, trying to figure out what to study, getting uniform together, all that stuff. And then I'm kind of proud of this moment, but it probably wasn't the best thing to do, right? Because you always want to have more class than those individuals that are being classless. But
Sure.
at that juncture, I wasn't in that mindset back in those days. So yeah, so when I won BTZ, all of my leadership that was on stage, as they put out their hands to shake my hand, I just walked by them all. Because at that juncture, I felt like, why are you shaking my hand? That one part,
Yeah, you did nothing to get
yeah,
there.
you did nothing to attempt to help me in this process. So yeah, so like when you ask questions of where are we now, I think those are one-offs now.
Yes.
I think those are one-offs on people being that disrespectful. That there's things that still happen because you have to learn how to talk to people and things of that nature. But yeah, I don't think it's anywhere near that disrespectful as it was back then. So yeah, so as an airman, it was pretty tough, and it led me to want to cross train, and that's one of the pivotal reasons of why I cross train.
So what you're saying is just because somebody outranks you doesn't give them the right to treat you like shit all day long?
It does not give them the right. It does not give them the right.
Because they're human beings.
That's right.
And they're putting their life on the line just like you are.
That's right. So, as you know, I'm on my battlefield circulation right now. This is my first stop coming out here as I'm visiting some of my organizations. But starting off at the 93rd Wing, that's one of the things that I told them. I don't have many pet peeves, but if you want to set Mojo off, disrespect people.
Right.
Disrespect people, and that will set me off.
And kind of going with that, the some of the two maxims that I hold to is number one, moral high ground. Get it, hold on to it, embrace it until your dying day, never let it go, and that ties into benefit of the doubt. As far as some of that goes, and so I've had some of my best leaders who kind of personified, exemplified those two concepts. But as far as your leaders and some of the people who were the most impactful for your career, A, who were they? And B, what did they do for you?
I'm going to go with two people. The first person that I'll start with is Colonel Madeley. Colonel Madeley is he's an ISR officer, and Curtis Madeley, and he's at the 480th Wing right now. And he was my commander when I went to JSOC.
Okay.
And while I was there, he just exemplified everything that's great about a person.
Nice.
Who so happened to be a commander, right? Spectacular person who just so happened to have a job as being a commander, and he was thoughtful. He listened, critically listened. He instilled confidence. He gave you the ability to fail forward when I didn't even know that was a thing. Right? So he just encapsulated everything that I thought meant being the consummate professional.
Nice.
And guess what? He didn't really even have to say any of that. The way he carried himself, right? Those descriptors are my terms. That's nothing that he ever used to describe himself. But that's how I saw him. And we had this thing to where I just would go to him to vent, and I told him that, hey, when I come to you to vent, I'm not necessarily needing your help or needing you to fix it. And in many instances, I would just walk into his office, just break the door, seal, say what I had to say, and I'd be gone before he even looked up. But once I got it out, I was good. And I'm ready to go execute the mission accordingly. But yeah, he was just a spectacular officer. I still think very highly of him. We were just in email communication probably about 3 weeks ago before my email went out. My email has been out for like the last 3 or 4 days. Hopefully it comes back up soon. But yeah, before my email went out, I was still in contact with him. So just absolutely great. I feel like because I grew up on the peripheries, once I became an intel guy, like I said, I retrained as a staff sergeant, but I put tech sergeant on right before I got to the location that I was going to. And in many instances, I was the lead intel guy on a lot of the locations. And because I deployed so much, it was like I never really got immersed in many of the bases that I was at to find a mentor.
Gotcha.
I mean, so, 1-to-1, I was home 6 months, gone 6 months, home 6 months. So, as you mentioned earlier, you're still trying to be a husband, you're still trying to be a father, all those other things. So mentorship kind of fell by the wayside, trying to do some of that other stuff. So for many of my years, I can't really say that I had a true individual that I ran ideas off of. It was just like a lot of hard knocks life for me and figuring out stuff on your own type of thing. But when I went to Ramstein in Germany, I encountered Chief James Davis, who was the MAGCOM command chief at that time, and then my 3rd Air Force command chief was Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Khalid Wright at that time, and I'd have to say that he had a pivotal effect on me on just conversations, right? No strict, hey Mojo, you need to do this. No, hey man, why you ain't doing it this way, right? None of that. Just listening, allowing me to get out what I needed to say, and having the knack to know when to say something, right? Because I think that's an art as well. Because specifically for me, when I go to a person, I'm not always looking for you to fix it, right? I may just be coming because I just got to get it out. That's what kind of guy I am. Once I get it out, I'm good.
Because you're a human being. Sometimes you just got to vent.
I just got to get it out. And and he has the sensational ability, at least when it comes to me, to know when to do which mode. When to say something and when to just be like, you good, dog? I'm good. Let's go get after it. That's it.
And that's it.
So encountering him in Ramstein was very pivotal for me as well. Nice. And I really feel like me sitting before you today as a command chief is a lot of a testament to him and some of those conversations that he had with me. But he still didn't have a conversation that was impactful enough for me to want to pick up a golf club. so I'm holding out. Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, right? I'm not going to be a golfer.
But it could be like either a cigar, maybe a scotch, right?
Either
one of those.
I
so 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But golfing, no,
nice.
Not gonna be me.
So going to talk about Chief Wright again, another one of my man crushes. Just a good dude doing the right thing, carrying the mail in the way he absolutely can, and watching him testify on Capitol Hill. Just a very smart, educated, learned warrior doing the right things for the right people. But that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
So that's him. Years of training, years of education, perhaps years of reading.
That's right.
So do you have any favorite leadership books or stuff that you like to read in your spare time that has helped you out, either A, as a human being, or B, as a leader?
Yeah, so I definitely think one of the most impactful books that I've read since being a leader and a military member, to which I've been a military member all my working life, if you will, is The 5 Love Languages. And I know when I say that in many of the venues that I go to, I kind of get a side eye on that specific book. But for me, the premise of that book is relationships, right? And sometimes in the military, we use the term relationships, or our analogous term to that is networks, right? Because our superpower of Chiefs is our network.
You bet.
That's our superpower, our networks. You know, so for me, for that network to be thriving is how well are you in your relationship with those individuals that comprise the network. And for me, that's what the 5 love languages it does. It teaches you how to build a relationship, how to understand the individuals that you are communicating with, and hopefully giving them an inkling of who you are as a person for them to understand you as well, and then communicate in their language. Effectively communicate in their language.
Yeah. You know, huge. And so if you haven't been to, go to 5lovelanguages.com. You can go on there. You can take the love language test on how you want someone to express love toward you, and then have your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, have them take that test and just match it up. And you don't necessarily have to agree with it. Just understand that the cool thing about it is that there's 5 different things, 5 different ways people like to be loved.
That's right.
And so for me, it's just helping, again, kind of like you're saying, you know, here it is, a senior leader of the United States Air Force saying that you, as a senior enlisted person in our wing, you're going to adjust to other people.
That's right.
It's not the lower people that are going to have to adjust to you, but you're smart enough, educated enough, and experienced enough to have the presence of mind to adjust your leadership style towards other people that work for you.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right. I mean, us doing a podcast, right? That's a level of communication. Understanding that, right? If you're saying I can't reach millennials, then hello, attempt to talk in their language.
Right.
Right. Build the relationship to talk in their language to where you can be effective.
And maybe they're not good at interpersonal relationships or communication, but maybe they do want to get on YouTube and hear something about leadership just from 2 dudes who've been around the block a few times, who like to sit around, maybe have a drink or something, and just revel in the fact that we can get together as teammates and just have a good conversation.
Yes.
You know, so that I think that gets missed on so many different levels. But talking about some of the human aspect, and again, I'm just going back to it. One of the things that I try and ask in each one of the podcasts is what you do for your own resiliency. And I know General Goldfein and Chief Wright talk about the 2-10-5-7, 2 hours a day for you, 10 hours at work, 5 hours at home disconnected from work, and then 7 hours of sleep. So what do you do for you as not only the command chief inside our wing, but also as a military spouse and husband? What do you do for you and your family to make sure that you can restore your soul when you come into work every morning?
You know, that's interesting because Chief Wright has told me about that equation, and I'm not good at math. You know, I just try to figure it out. I don't quite have it systematically like that, but you know, for me, it's assuring that I account for the time for family. You know, so I was mentioning to you earlier that, hey, I'm on my first stop on my battlefield circulation for the and being in my position as the command chief for the 93rd AGAL, and my family is in San Antonio right now for spring break. You know, so at the tail end of this, I'm going to meet them for a couple days before going off to my next venture. You know, so that's an aspect of, hey, building that into the schedule, knowing that they were going to be out here to kind of exhale a little bit, breathe my baby girl in, let her
oxygen.
Let her revive me, and then I'm going to go back out there for my airmen. So I'm fully recovered and I'm ready to execute the mission for them. So it's, for me, it's just being mindful, right? As
Dr. McCauley,
the mindfulness exercise that we have. So to your question, I can say that I have now incorporated that into my equation.
Nice.
So when I do wake up in the morning, I attempt to kind of restate, hey, here's your purpose. Here's your purpose of why you're getting out of the bed before you even place your feet on the ground. Here's your purpose. You know, so I've included that into my resilience steps that I didn't have in there before. So I now try to start with that purpose statement of why I'm getting up to do this and what's the importance of me getting up to do that. And then utilizing the entire team. You know, for me at the wing, I'm fortunate enough that the chaplain's office is 25 paces, you know, from my office. So I make time and I go in there and talk to the chaps. Hey, chaps, let me just run this by you real quick. This is what I was thinking. Or, hey, what do you have for me?
Right.
And every now and then he has a couple tidbits for me, a couple good words that I get to ingest a little bit, and that's some recovery. So, you know, I try to just use time wisely to know that I have to be resilient for myself in order for me to be effective for the airmen that I'm excited to lead out there. So that's a great question, but so really for me, family, and my resiliency measure of choice other than family is I love comedy shows.
Nice.
I love comedy shows. So the wife and I got back from Guam in June of last year, and we probably have already hit like 5 or 6 comedy shows. So I'll search them out. Just here as of late, since we were at Eglin and Herbert Field at the time, we were going to Atlanta. But even since I've been to Moody, we've already gone to Atlanta for another comedy show. So yeah, so we'll travel to see our family. But that's my thing. I love comedy shows.
Nice.
I love to laugh. I love to smile. So
that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, being able to take in a comedy show is pretty good.
So, you know, talking about family, what about the thoughts of any one of your children joining? Do you welcome that? Are you afraid of that? What would your thoughts be?
So, not afraid of that. So, our 17-year-old that graduates on the 31st of May, he actually is thinking about coming in, and he's thinking about coming in as a battlefield airman. So much so that I'm going to give your number to him so he can just call you directly.
Perfect.
So we just did that on the spot. He didn't know that I was going to give his number to my son for him to call you, but I can't take the credit for that. My wife actually brought that up. She was like, why don't you just give him his number and let him call? I was like, well, that's a great idea. But that's what he wants to do. He wants to come in as a battlefield airman.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
See, and I'm absolutely terrified that my sons will join.
Yeah.
I like that. Like, I don't think, like, and it's odd because I don't think anything could make me more proud as a father than to watch them join and serve it as I've done. But man, it like gets me like I don't want them to experience warfare. And it comes back to the whole Holden Caulfield catcher in the rye thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that fall from innocence happen, and I would want to see. I'm a firm believer that you don't stop playing because you grow old. You grow old because you stop playing.
That's right.
You know, and so I want to keep that going. So
well, I have a similar outlook, but I think I'm more impressed with the idea that he has a plan. That's more than what I had at 17, 18.
You bet.
Yeah, I didn't have a plan. You know, so he has a couple courses of actions, if you will, of what he wants to do. So knowing that it's systematic, right? He's put some thought into it. He has COAs of what he wants to get after. So I think I'm more impressed with the idea that he has a plan of things that he finds to be important.
You bet. Yeah. You know, and again, talking about family a little bit in my interview with our wing commander, Colonel Birch, he was talking about stuff, and a large portion of the interview that we had was him kind of professing his like undying love and admiration for our military spouses.
Yeah.
For all the stuff that they have to do. So how has that been in your household, military married to military, where you're both military spouses having to play the roles and still having to raise kids and account for each other's careers? How have you guys gotten through that? How have you made it work for you?
Well, I tell you, for me, I think the toughest part is the aspect that you mentioned of having to account for careers. You know, so as an intel guy, you know, I grew up in the ops world, and as I said at the onset of the show, she's a one Charlie, so she grows up.
One Charlie hero.
One Charlie hero.
Nice.
She grows up in the ops world as well, so Guam is probably the best indication of where this really manifests itself. So I get hired as the group superintendent. Guam only has very limited positions, so she couldn't be in the ops group with me as the ops group superintendent, so they moved her over to be the IGQ. So she was the director of complaints in the time that she was there, which is a great position. But now when you start to talk to their functional managers, they're looking for specificity of things on promoting folks to those super grades.
You bet.
You know, and she's currently a master sergeant, so, you know, for me, that's when it kind of wears on my heart of she has to be outsourced because we so happen to grow up in the same group, and now it could have a pivotal impact on how she goes up the ranks and her promotability level, or the aspect of her not being look at for her own merit of if she attains something, someone ideally stating, well, her husband is a chief, her husband is a command chief, she's gotten some type of preferential treatment, you know. So those are the things that bother me.
Sure.
A great deal is that she's spectacular in her own right, and I don't like the idea that that perspective can be tainted because of what my rank is, and
Sure.
she's not being looked at accordingly for that. You know, with the kids, it's tough. We have a great network. You know, she's out here right now with my in-laws, her side of the family. We moved to a location to where my family's close. My sister in Jacksonville is an hour and a half away. My parents are down in Tampa, 3.5 hours away. So our network is strong. So when it comes to the kids, we always have been somewhere where we had a strong network. And even when we went out to Guam, ideally we knew some people out there that was in Germany with us. So
nice.
we've been able to have a pretty good network to assist us in that. And then we just try to account for one another's whereabouts, to where it's her usually trying to account for my whereabouts because I'm always the one that's out the door.
Sure.
You know, so we figured that piece out, but I think we've survived in doing that aspect because of the network that we have, and it being so strong. But that first piece that I mentioned to you, that's the one that really wears on me, is that ideally she may not be giving her just due because of where I sit.
Having to take a back seat
Yeah.
as your career plays itself out.
Yeah, that's not cool with me. So we try to sort through that accordingly, but we make it happen. She a big deal. She a big deal. I just need other people to know that she's a big deal in her own right.
Right.
Yeah.
You bet. Yeah. You know, and so with that, and a little bit the kind of that we've been talking about, you seem to be adjusting extremely well to account for our youngest generation,
Yeah.
who are coming in, that, you know, understanding that, you know, at a bare minimum, life meets everybody halfway.
That's right.
So you're trying to do your job to meet them on their level, to communicate in ways that I think some of our leaders weren't trying to communicate with us. We didn't communicate like them, so they had to scream at us.
That's right.
Because we were no nothing shithead, you know, young airmen who didn't know anything, right? So that was always unfortunate. So what advice would you want to give to the younger generation to help you help them? What would you want to see more of to help them even find greater success?
In order for them to help me help them, is just tell me what's on your mind. Just tell me what's on your mind. So to all my folks, particularly in the 93rd AGAL, but I'm an Air Force chief, so anyone in the Air Force that needs my assistance, I'm here for them as well. But just having the courage to say what's on their mind, and do not suffer in silence. I say that in many places that I go to. Do not suffer in silence. Don't become practiced in being silent. You know, find your way of effectively communicating, but you have to find that way. And in order for them to help me to help them, they have to be able to speak. And you know, as we said in the hood, closed mouths don't get fed. You know, so if you're trying to get fed, you better open your mouth and speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So along those lines, if you could go back and give yourself some advice when you were an airman, when you were an NCO, and you're a brand new senior NCO, what advice would that look like, and would it be different?
It would, I would say as an airman, it definitely would be different in the aspect of don't come in with the other people's demons. Because I really think that hindered those very pivotal years of learning the Air Force, and going back to what you mentioned earlier of the things that we've said in the past of, yeah, I enlisted in 91, but I didn't join to that year. And I think a lot of me not joining to that specific year is it took me a time to shed other people's demons. So I think as an airman, that's the one aspect that I probably would do over is just really coming in from that first day on my own accord, understanding who I am, confident in who I was, and then just progressing from there. Um, in the NCO ranks, I don't think I would change a thing.
Nice.
I don't think I would change a thing. I don't know if it's glutton for punishment. I kind of grew up hard knocks life, and I survived that, right? Scars and bruises, if you will, but survived it nonetheless. And I think for my NCO tier, it was similar. I had some scrapes and bumps and bruises, but nothing that didn't allow me to survive. So in those two tiers, I think what I went through and who I was as a person only fit that generation. You take Aaron Edwards and Junior NCO Edwards and put him in this time now, and I probably never get to make Senior NCO, right? I probably would have had to exit some time ago. So I think the time that I grew up and how I grew up fit the model of what we were as a force in that time. As a senior NCO, I think the subtle difference that I would have made was being amenable to the idea of asking for a mentor. Right? So I had become so good with being calloused in how I grew up in those junior years that my mindset at that time was, I'm going to figure it out. Right? I don't need to reach out to anybody. I don't need to necessarily ask for some assistance. Yeah, I might not get it right the first time, but eventually I'm going to get it right. So just keep working with the methods that have gotten you here thus far and get after it. And I think because I became a senior NCO, still pretty junior. I mean, so I put master on, I think, 12 years or something like that. So I'm still relatively junior, in the grand scheme of the military at large. So I still had a lot to learn. But for me, I just kind of said, hey, you've made it this far, and you didn't necessarily have many positive influences and many mentors that you led on. So keep doing what's working. But yeah, I think if I could go back and tell Master Sergeant Select Edwards a tidbit of advice, that's what I would tell him. Hey, reach out, extend the olive branch, and seek those individuals that could potentially make your path a little less cumbersome and a little less bruises and bumps along the way. But other than that, I would offer those tidbits of advice at the junior enlisted airman tier, and then in the senior, coming into the senior CO tier. I think that's the only thing that I would switch up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think phenomenal points, one and all. And for a final question before we wrap up this edition of this edition of Leaders with Leaders in the Cape Leading Revolution, what advice, like the first piece of advice you would have to anybody in the world about leadership, like the one key, the one thing that you would want them to focus on to help them be more successful, well-rounded, you name it. What would you want people to focus on?
Well, I know I mentioned to you before that I love the idea of having my pH balance, right? My patience and my humility
Yes.
kind of gives me a continual line of balance. But if that doesn't work for the larger masses, I would offer them an additional word to humility. Humility is like my favorite word, so much so that my email address is humility. I mean, that's what I really try to live by, is being a humble person. But you have to be genuine. You have to be genuine in every endeavor. You have to be genuine in who you are as a person, because when you're not genuine, those individuals that you lead don't get a fair accounting of who you are.
Right.
So now they can't adjust accordingly because they don't even know who you are because you're not being genuine in your endeavors. So I think being genuine as who you are as a person and being genuine in how you conduct yourself with your people. You know, so I kind of gave the ALS crew the litmus test of that, if you will. And I said, well, hey, how do you feel about that leader who you've had to tell them your children's name 5, 6, 7 times, right? So now when they come to speak to you, you understand that they're not being genuine. Right. They're just giving you the company line. And I was like, so when you understand that aspect about that leader, how do you feel? And, you know, most of them, if I had to do it physically, right, thumbs down. Yeah, we're done with that dude or do that. They get the thumbs down because we can discern that they're not genuine in their process and their concern for us. So those are the things that I try to lead myself with and concerns, and I try to have those concerns to give to individuals as people, right, on what their parents named them, not the rank that I call them. You bet. And that's the way that I attempt. And I think if we start in that capacity of understanding that they're people, or one of our soft truths, right, that humans are more important than hardware.
You bet.
Right? So understanding that aspect that humans are, and ideally more important than hardware, that they're on the right path.
Well, epic answer as a way to finish this podcast. And just going over some of the notes here, and again, as I always try and do, going back to my leadership methodology of just CAPE lead, of caring, alignment, perspective, and expectations. So, you know, so we talked about that. You know, like, I love the idea of the Edwards brand. Is like, what is that brand? If you're going to brand yourself and find success and get other people to buy in, maybe they want to buy into the Edwards label. Well, hey, what does that brand look like? You know, that's caring, alignment, perspective, and expectations all rolled into one. Absolutely love that. You know, like what is a great you? Help shed other people's demons, right? So that's a level of caring, a little bit of expectations. Figure out who people are, point out blind spots, help them critically think, understanding the difference between skill versus rank, and that regardless, maybe they're just your teammate, have something to contribute. So we talked about overcoming adversity. You're not having any style of leadership because we don't have one style of person. I love that viewpoint and just the different metaphor that kind of creates, and just the level of diversity. If you think about that, because there's only one Tim Pachesa in the United States Air Force. You know, so each individual is their smallest minority.
That's right.
You know, as far as how they see things, how they interact. So I thought that was a wonderful thing to bring up. Lead through fear. You know, you talk about caring for somebody. It's helping them lead through fear and find success through the things that scare them the most and help them achieve. I think that's just absolutely epic. You talked about listening. You talked about the importance of relationships, but not just networking, right? It's just relationships. You know, I did the podcast with Phil Hudson and Adam Veazey, 7th Air Force and 51st Fighter Wing, and we talked about, like, hey, it's about love. It's about love of our fellow teammate, of our fellow man and woman. Just love each other as airmen, as chiefs, as command chief, like whatever. Let's just love each other a little bit and just see where that can take us towards these relationships. Do not suffer in silence. And, you know, there's so many, you know, with suicide rates and some of the things that we have, and divorce rates, everybody's suffering with something. Everybody's suffering. So again, speak up somehow, some way. Go to a trusted leader. Go to your chaplain. Go to mental health. Whether you're in the military or not, please just open up. If you need to email me, chachi@capelead.com, CHACHI@capelead.com. We'll just have the conversation. We'll help. I'll push you to whatever agencies that we have, and there's tons of agencies that are free to call in at any different time. Happy to get you going in the right direction. Ask for a mentor and be genuine. I mean, holy amazing. I appreciate your time, Chief Edwards. Thank you for being here on the CAPE Lead Revolution.
Thank you.
So cheers to you and all your success. Wish you nothing but health and happiness as the Command Chief, 93rd AGAL. And we'll catch you here next time on the CAPE Lead Revolution. This is Chachi reminding you always to educate, anticipate, and dominate. We'll talk to you next time.